The Bracelets by David Toth, originally published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, July 2015. Read by the author. The police barrier tape said, "Do not cross" and "No cruiser." I lifted it and stepped out of the crime scene. Even though I was leaving, not crossing, a uniformed cop laid a heavy hand on my shoulder. "The inspector will be here any minute," he said. "He was going to be here any minute 20 minutes ago," I said, and walked toward the steps that curved away from the high-rise toward the pool. It was past 8 o'clock, and the only other civilian at the scene was the Paradiso's general manager. He had succeeded in getting the paramedics to remove the body before the inspector arrived, a feat that was accomplished with plenty of pleading and probably bribery as well. It worked. After the ambulance left, most of the hotel guests lost interest and drifted back to their vacations. Mrs. Arnault sat in a wicker chair she had pulled close to the pool's edge. Her feet were folded under her chair, making her petite body seem even smaller. A cop stood at a respectful distance, his dark blue uniform black under the setting sun. I dragged the chair over. She looked up and trained her bottomless black eyes on me. "You're the one who found Benoit?" "Yes, I'm so sorry." "Did he say anything before?" "No." For some reason, she seemed relieved to hear this. "But you knew him, did you not?" "We talked once or twice. Trivial stuff. I told him about my honeymoon to Marseille when I was a struggling writer with a loving wife. He had asked me if I was the Jim Koenig, and I told him no, it was just a coincidence. He seemed so happy." Mrs. Arnault's voice trailed off. I put one hand on her arm, and with the other I pulled out the bracelet, making sure my back was turned to the cop. Her eyes lit up with relief. She grabbed it, ran a finger over the broken link, and slipped it into the pocket of her dress. Clearly, the bracelet meant a lot to her. "Where did you find it, Mr. Koenig?" "Call me Jim." "Where did you find it, Jim?" Close to your husband." "Oh, what luck. May I ask you to keep this between us?" "Why?" "If the police find it, well, I hate to say it, it sounds so raciste, but you're afraid they would keep it because it's valuable." "Yes." It was her turn to lay her hand on my arm. Before I could say anything, we heard a siren and another police car pulled up in front of the hotel. Seconds later, a short, stocky man wearing a baseball cap blazed up the path leading to the high-rise. A uniformed policeman did his best to keep up. I freed my arm from Mrs. Arnault's grasp and stood up. "Thank you," she said, and went back to studying the water. I walked back to the high-rise. "What did you call a crime scene where there was no crime?" "Just an unfortunate accident." The short man in the baseball cap walked up to me. "I am Inspector Sosa. You found the body of," he consulted his notes, "Benoit Arnault, is it correct?" "That's correct. Your English is very good, Inspector." "Thank you. I have relatives in Chicago, although I do not much like the United States myself." "What time did you find Mr. Arnault?" "Just after 7:30. I left the Albatross at 7:25, and it's only 5 minutes or so from the hotel." "How long before you go to front desk to call ambulance?" "A few minutes." "Did you examine the body?" "Examine?" "Yes, to see if he's dead." "Oh, I checked his pulse." "That's all? You didn't touch the body?" "It was no longer Mr. Arnault, but the body." "No." It seemed a small lie, more of an omission really. The rest of the inspector's questions were routine. Address, occupation, date of departure, that sort of thing. Still, it was 8:30 when he finished his questioning and said I was free to go. I walked back to the Albatross. Charlene was sitting at the back table, running a soft thumb over the lip of her wine glass and watching a young couple holding hands at the corner table. I sat down across from her and called for a mojito in a tall glass. "How did it go?" she asked, barely looking up. She looked pensive. It was a good look for her. "It dragged. The inspector has the bad habit of asking the same questions over and over again. Maybe he wanted to catch you in a lie. I didn't say anything to that. I took Charlene's hand in mine, but she drew it away. "Terrible, isn't it?" she said. "Yes, only a Frenchman would think of falling from his balcony on his vacation." "What if he was pushed?" "I thought of that. He was a bad tipper like most Europeans, but not bad enough for the maid to push him out of the window for it." "You're horrible." "I know. How about dinner?" "I ate already. Besides, I don't want to get used to you." "Why? I'm not dangerous. I only found him. I didn't kill him." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." The next day, Charlotte and I went water skiing, and the sight of her in a bikini pushed all thoughts of the bracelet out of my mind. That is, until I listened to the phone message when I returned to my room. I punched in my guest ID number and the inspector's voice filled the room. There are some more questions I'd like to ask you. Please come down to the police station at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will send a driver. He gave me almost 24 hours to mull it over. I wondered if that was calculated. I was still thinking about it later that night while I was having dinner with Charlene. I tuned out halfway through a story about her sister-in-law who had sold out and moved from Canada to California. What's the matter, she asked. You seem very distant. I'm fine. Does it ever seem to you that holidays are more stressful than work? Like you never know what you're supposed to do. What kind of work do you do? I already told you. I know, but I heard differently. Word around the pool is that you're a famous hack writer traveling under an assumed name. Is that what they said? A hack writer? Are you? No, I sell outboard motors in Chicago. In a city with no ocean? Have you ever heard of the Great Lakes? At 2 minutes to 8 on Friday morning, a beat-up black Peugeot pulled up to the hotel. Aside from a cab driver asleep at the wheel of his taxi and a few early birds walking out their breakfast, the hotel entrance was deserted. But the heat was all over, making even breathing difficult. The driver jerked a thumb at the back seat and I climbed in. He drove fast over the narrow roads that snaked through sugarcane fields and small dusty towns, where the only local attractions were the girls in their thin dresses. The police station was just off the town square, nestled between a scuba diving office and a seafood restaurant. It was even hotter inside, the fans trying in vain to breathe life into the dead air. The inspector sat behind a small desk in a small office at the back of the squad room. A Chicago Cubs baseball cap hung on the coat rack behind him. He stood up to shake my hand and did not smile. This heat, it is something, no? A lot of foreign visitors do not tolerate it, but I suppose it is the price for paradise. I thought of Mr. Arnault cool and comfortable at the morgue and shivered. You may wonder why I want to talk again, the inspector said. I do. I don't see why we couldn't take care of this at the hotel. The questions at the hotel, they were a formality, the inspector said, searching for the right word. We do not like to bother visitors to our island any more than necessary. Never a good policy to bother the paying customers, I said. The inspector ignored the bait. However, when a crime happens, we have to follow it wherever it may go. Police work is like being in love with a bad woman. You never know where she will take you. I didn't say anything. What time did you find Mr. Arnault? It must have been just after 7:30. The last time I checked my watch was at the Albatross at 7:25 and it's only 5 minutes or so from the hotel. But I already told you this. How long before you go to front desk to call ambulance? No more than a few minutes. Did you examine the body? You mean, did I go through his pockets to see if he had any loose change? No, I didn't. Mr. Koenig, it's just a routine question, which I already answered 2 days ago. What's this all about? Do you have any leads? You go direct to the front desk after you find the body? Yes, I went straight to the front desk, and let me answer your next question. No, I didn't see anyone else at the scene. No need to get angry, Mr. Koenig. Do you know something more? Is that why you ask me these questions again? I do not discuss an investigation with a tourist who is involved. I'm not involved. I just had the bad luck of finding the accident victim. Ah, so that is what you think it was? An accident? Of course I think it was an accident, unless you think his wife pushed him out of the window to collect on a sizable insurance claim. Is it not how it would happen in your novels? I didn't say anything to that. Why did you not tell me you were a famous writer of mystery? I told you on Wednesday that I was a writer. Afraid the other guests will recognize you? No. I prefer to leave work at home when I'm on vacation. You have no idea how many people want you to listen to their stories in progress once they find out you're a successful writer. Did Mrs. Arnault? What do you mean? You were talking with Mr. Arnault's wife after the crime. What did you talk about? We didn't really talk. We were waiting for you to show up. I was trying to comfort her. Like you comfort lonely women from Canada? I did my best not to look surprised. I see from your passport that you traveled to France a few times last year. Did you know Mrs. Arnault before now? I laughed. If you're trying to piss me off so I'll let something slip, you're wasting your time. I told you everything I know already. Mr. Koenig, I believe very much there is something you are not telling me. So let me tell you this. Justice is justice, even on this island. Even for a rich gringo tourist. The inspector rose to indicate he was finished with me. Before I closed the door behind me, he called out to me. My wife is reading one of your books. Which one? The Rap, I think you would say in English. You mean the cover-up? Yes. How does she like it? She doesn't think it's believable. I left without closing the door. The ride back was even hotter than an hour before, but I had other concerns now. The inspector seemed to think that I was holding back. But how could he have known about the bracelet, or even suspected it existed? Did he really believe there was a connection between Mrs. Arnault and me? Did someone see me that night? No. If I had been spotted, I probably would have had a different sort of conversation with the inspector. I wish to hell I had handed the bracelet over to the police instead of giving it to Mrs. Arnault. The inspector might take my gesture to the widow the wrong way and arrest me for obstruction of justice. Still, the inspector's attitude was almost insulting. He seemed to think that my being a rich American, a trip to a third world police station would be enough to make me fall to pieces. It should have been enough, I suppose, for any reasonable person. When the driver dropped me at the hotel, I went to my room and waited for 5 minutes. Then I locked the door and walked up one flight to Mrs. Arnaud's suite. A sour-faced nurse the hotel had assigned to Mrs. Arnaud opened the door. She wouldn't let me in, countering my faltering Spanish with a stern hand. This would have gone on for a while, but then Mrs. Arnaud spoke from inside the cavernous suite. The nurse turned her head slightly and I slipped past her. Mrs. Arnaud was lying on the sofa, a thin blanket covering her frail body. Her head was propped up on 2 pillows. Today she looked well past middle age. She lowered her gaze from the ceiling when I entered. "Oh, it is you, Jim," she said. "How good of you to visit me. You're a true gentleman." The nurse grabbed my arm and protested in rapid-fire Spanish, all the while giving me the evil eye, but Mrs. Arnaud dismissed her with a nod of her head. I sat down on the coffee table, pushing aside some napkins and a half-drunk cup of tea. I put my hand on hers as a way of preparation. "You know you're the first person who came to see me and didn't ask me how I was doing," Mrs. Arnaud said. "I don't like idle conversation," I said. "Neither did my husband." "I guess that's why he enjoyed talking to you so much," Mrs. Arnaud said. "That's just what I wanted to talk to you about," I said. "Your husband." But Mrs. Arnaud was not ready to listen. Benoit was not one to express his emotions, but I always knew how he felt. After 35 years, a wife understands her husband, and they rarely have to talk anymore. "Are you married, Jim?" "I was once." "What happened, if I may ask?" "You may." "We didn't get to the part where we could be comfortably silent with each other like you and your husband. We were very vocal." "Vocal?" she said, her eyes growing wider at the unfamiliar word. "Loud. We fought all the time." "Oh, I see." She reached for a napkin and wiped her eyes. Next year was to be our 35th wedding anniversary. We were planning to go to Greece like our honeymoon. I let her cry. I knew that any words of mine would be futile. Sometimes the best thing you could do for another human being was to simply be present. When she regained her composure, I said, "Mrs. Arnaud, I've just come from the police station." The inspector wanted to talk to me again. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. "Why?" "I'm getting the feeling he's suspecting me of not giving something I should have to the police." "He's a fool. Why can't he leave the whole thing alone? Haven't I suffered enough?" I was wondering the same thing myself. Mrs. Arnaud's eyes narrowed. "Because he enjoys this. So many of the locals hate the tourists. They think that because we have a little bit of money we are rich." "So that's it?" "He took Benoit's camera. Did he tell you that?" "No, he didn't. He wouldn't tell me anything." Her face softened. "Of course not. He's the one asking all the questions." "Why did he take the camera?" "Because he could." "You tell me, what does Benoit's camera have to do with any of this?" "I bought it for his birthday. It was very expensive." The nurse came into the room carrying a tray with soup and a glass of sparkling water. "It's time for my soup. I'm afraid I must ask you to leave, Jim." Suddenly she wasn't so eager to dismiss the nurse. I walked to the door and looked back before I walked out. Mrs. Arnaud sat up, seemingly with great effort, and put the tray on her lap. She picked up the spoon, dropped it, picked it up again, and dipped it into the soup. I wasted the rest of the morning by the pool watching 2 freckled British kids tossing a football back and forth. When I couldn't take any more, I went to Charlene's bungalow. I knocked and went in before she could answer. She was lying on her stomach on her bed, covered by only a towel. "Bad hangover?" "Bad sunburn. I don't know why I keep insisting that I can tan. I'm Irish, for Christ's sake." "We should always push beyond our comfort zone," I said. "Easier for you to say. You can tan." "Would you like me to get you some aloe vera?" "I have some already. You could be nice and rub my back with it." I went to the bed and kissed her on the nape of her neck. "Where did you go this morning?" she asked. "To the beach." "You always have a chauffeur drive you to the beach?" "You saw me?" "You were seen, let's just put it that way." "It's a good thing we're not married. I could never lead a double life behind your back." "No, you couldn't, and that's not an answer." When I didn't say anything, she said, "Does this have anything to do with Mr. Arnaud?" "Maybe." I picked up the vial of aloe vera and rubbed some on my fingers. Then with my elbow, I pushed the towel aside and started smearing it on her reddened back. Word around the pool is that the police don't exactly buy the accident theory. "Oh? Who told you this? They?" "Yes. You know Ronaldo, our tour guide? The short, loud one?" "Yes. He loves to talk and is a cousin of one of the cops. Apparently the cops couldn't find anyone who could vouch for Mrs. Arnaud being in the dining room for the whole night on Wednesday." "What do you make of that, Mr. Mystery Writer?" I was glad she was on her stomach and couldn't see my face. "Maybe your friends should take a vacation from their imaginations," I said. "It certainly beats a boring accident scenario, don't you think?" Charlene said, her voice melting under my touch. Friday was our last full day in paradise. By the afternoon, Charlene was feeling better and we drove into town and ate an overpriced seafood dinner at the harbor. Sometimes I went 10 minutes without thinking about Mr. Arnault or a golden bracelet I wished I had never found. On Saturday, Charlene and I drove to the airport together. We decided to have a last coffee before walking to our respective gates. Afterwards, we walked past a bookstore that had a display of cheap summer paperbacks. She went in to buy one and I stayed outside to browse the display. Book signings in the big chain bookstores were always my least favorite part of being a popular writer. Unlike real writers who had a small but intellectual fan base, who asked thought-provoking questions, my fans came in droves and would tell me that my work had entertained them and provided relief while they were recovering from an illness or going through a tough time. No one ever asked me what my work really meant, which was probably a good thing, because the writer who can answer that question should not write in the first place. Charlene came out and handed me a book. They only had the paperback. Would you sign it for me? It was my latest, the one with the anchor and the revolver to indicate the themes of sea and murder, I suppose. Sure, I took her pen and scribbled on the inside flap. Charlene took it back and read, "To a goddess, may she not be burnt by lies or the sun. Jim." She looked up and closed the book. Very clever. Walk an old maid to her gate? I said I would. On the way, we saw Mrs. Arnault walking down the concourse, aided by her nurse. She was walking with her head bent, her shoulders hunched over, shuffling her feet as if lifting them required great effort. Her whole demeanor was of someone who was recovering from a terrible illness, or a shock of some kind. There was something almost theatrical about the scene, and we could not help but follow her with our gaze as the procession passed before us. We arrived at Charlene's gate. This was the part I hated, the goodbyes and the promises to keep in touch that would never be kept. The inspector ran up to us. He took off his baseball cap and wiped his brow. "Mrs. Arnault," he said between breaths. She already boarded her flight. I pointed at the board, which was flashing a departed sign. My stomach sank a few notches. "May I have a word with you in private?" "Sure." "Charlene, could you give me a few minutes?" "Of course. But what is this about?" The inspector pushed me to a nearby table. "Something tells me you didn't come just to say goodbye." The inspector dug around his shirt pocket for a cigarette and fired it up. "Nothing so pleasant." The inspector took off his cap and dropped it on the table. He smoothed back a few escaped strands of hair and leveled a cool gaze at me. Something bothered me about the case from the beginning. When I first talked to Mrs. Arnault, I was surprised she was not angry. When a husband dies with violence, a wife does not comprehend. She cannot believe this thing is possible. Death always happens to other husbands, but Mrs. Arnault, she acted like she expected it. What did you expect her to do, run up and down the hotel lobby tearing her hair out? Always the writer, eh, Mr. Koenig? Mrs. Arnault told me her husband was ill, feeling a headache on Wednesday night. She said maybe it was something more serious. But the autopsy revealed him to be healthy with not even alcohol in his system. But there was nothing to go on until I found the picture in Mr. Arnault's digital camera. What picture? And why did you take the camera in the first place? Mrs. Arnault had told me he had it on him when he went back to his room from the dining room. I figured I should take a look. And, by way of answer, the inspector pulled out a manila folder from the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a photograph and slapped it down in front of me. It was a picture of Mrs. Arnault sitting at a table in what I recognized as the main dining room of the Paradiso. She had her chin in her left hand, her arm propped up on the table. On her wrist was a heavy golden bracelet, which even through the photograph looked like the one I found on Mr. Arnault's body. So, this picture was taken at dinner on the night Mr. Arnault was killed. Killed? Si. The inspector pulled out another photograph and put it next to the one of Mrs. Arnault. It was the picture of an arm as laid out on what looked like an autopsy table. The arm had once belonged to Mr. Arnault. I recognized him by the dark blue sleeve of the dinner jacket. The sleeve was pushed up to reveal the same heavy golden bracelet I had found next to Mr. Arnault's body. The self-same bracelet I had handed his wife that night. It didn't make sense. I don't understand, unless... The bracelet you found next to Mr. Arnault's was not his, but his wife's. Unless there were two identical bracelets, not one. Just a minute, I didn't say I found anything on Mr. Arnault's body. You don't even know if there is a second bracelet. I know there is because I've seen it. Where? Mrs. Arnault showed it to me the second time I talked to her. The murder happened on Wednesday night. On Thursday morning, after I talked with you at the station, I found the picture of Mrs. Arnault in the camera. I went to the hotel to talk with her again. She said she had taken off the bracelet during dinner because it had a bad chain that would come apart. Well, that part was truth, nothing else. Suddenly, the airport seemed small and cramped, despite the fact that we're in an open room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The inspector dragged on his cigarette. The bracelet came apart, but not during her dinner with her husband. It came apart when she pushed her husband off the balcony and he grabbed her arm trying to save his life. I wanted to get up and run away, but my legs were made of lead. The second lead came after I found the picture. My assistant told me that after he questioned all the guests in the dining room, no one could say that Mrs. Arnault was in the dining room the whole night. except an 80-year-old Englishwoman who falls asleep when she talks. That observation and the bracelet in the picture led me to a new conclusion. So you're saying she snuck out of the dining room, followed her husband back to the room, and pushed him from the balcony. That's far-fetched to the point of being ridiculous. If it is ridiculous, then perhaps you should have planned it differently. Plan it? What are you getting at? Mrs. Arno wants to murder her husband. But how to do it? She turns to you, a successful mystery writer. Surely you know a way to make it look believable. After all, you do it for millions of people in your books. My thoughts picked up speed. You're not suggesting that I had anything to do with Arno's death. The inspector stubbed out his cigarette and lit another. You tell Mrs. Arno how she should do it. You tell her she should have an alibi, so you tell her the murder should be done during dinner when there are many witnesses, none of whom will remember exactly who is or who is not there for the entire dinner. You tell her to speak to Mrs. Henderson so that the old woman can remember her later. You can't be serious. Supposing that was her plan because I had nothing to do with it, how can she be certain that her husband will go back to their room during dinner? Most likely she asked him to go back to the room and bring her something that she says she forgot. And when he does, she is ready. You are waiting at the albatross where you wait until the murder is done. But you get curious, or perhaps you think that Mrs. Arno will not go through with it and needs your help. But to your delight, he's finished. Mrs. Arno tells you that her husband ripped off her bracelet when he fell. You tell her to go back to the dining room before she is missed. You check over the body and find the bracelet and give it back to her that night, or perhaps later. My head was spinning. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Is it? The hotel's tour guide, Ronaldo Sanchez, saw you looking at it when you ran to the front desk to call the ambulance. Then why didn't you lean on me Friday morning at the station? Because I didn't know you found the bracelet until today. The tour guide only came to tell me this morning. He did not think it was an important detail until he heard from his cousin that there was a golden bracelet on the victim's body. And I rushed straight here. I drove fast, but not fast enough to catch the killer. Only her accomplice. If I'm guilty of anything, it's obstruction of justice. Yes, I should have handed over the bracelet to the police. But I assumed it was Mr. Arnold's. Anyone would have. I kept looking at the two photographs, one showing a well-kept, middle-aged woman wearing a golden bracelet, and the other a wrist that was once her husband's, wearing the same bracelet. I felt like crying. She said she didn't want the police to confiscate the bracelet. That's why I gave it back to her. My voice sounded weak and far off. I gave her back the bracelet which, if found next to Mr. Arno, would have implicated Mrs. Arno in her husband's murder. The inspector stood up and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. There's one more bracelet I would like you to consider, Mr. Koenig. He held the cuffs so that the two halves were facing me. He yanked on the thick silver chain holding them together. This one is not gold, I'm afraid, but it has its matching bracelet firmly attached. Stand up. You are under arrest for the murder of French national Benoit Arnault. You're making a big mistake. Why would I kill Arnault? For Mrs. Arnault? You've seen what she looks like. For money? I have plenty of my own. We will have plenty of time to get to the true cause, the inspector said. Stand up. I will not ask you again. I stood. Charlene was looking at me, impatiently wrinkling her brows. Please, not in front of her. That's the least of your problems, the inspector said and spun me around. He slapped the cuffs on and started to herd me out of the terminal. I looked over my shoulder. The last thing I saw before the automatic doors closed behind me was Charlene's eyes growing wider with every step I took. Then the doors whooshed shut and I was hit with the blast of the morning heat.